Bad things happen when someone gets too much power. For example, Hitler gained absolute power over Germany, which led to World War II and millions of deaths worldwide. So the question is, how do we stop somebody like Hitler from getting too much power? Well, personally, if I had to stop Hitler, I'd hit him with a leg sweep. And then if he gets back up, throat punch connecting to a fly kick. But another way of stopping someone from getting too much power is with something called the separation of powers, which is basically when the power of the government is separated between three groups, so nobody can have too much power. These three groups are called the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The first group is the legislature. The legislature has the power to make and change the law. In Australia, the legislature is made up of the Parliament, the King, and the Governor-General. Here's how the legislature works. The Parliament, which is everyone who's been elected to the House of Representatives, and the Senate, vote on whether something should become a law. If enough people vote for it, then it just needs the King's approval for it to officially become a law. The only problem is the King lives in England and he doesn't work from home, so he gets someone called the Governor-General to approve it on his behalf. And that's how the legislature works. The second group is the executive. The executive has the power to put the law into action, and I'll explain what that means in a second. In Australia, the executive is made up of the Prime Minister, who's the leader of the government, and the government ministers, who are members of Parliament and senators that run government departments. The King and the Governor-General are also part of the executive. Like I said, the executive's role is to put the law into action. Laws are really just words on paper, so the executive's job is to basically make the law be real life. The executive does this by enforcing the law with government agencies like the Federal Police, the Border Force, intelligence agencies, and other agencies like the Tax Office. The executive also has to provide services required by the law, things like social services, healthcare, the military, and so on, and it does this through all the government departments run by the Prime Minister and ministers. As you can see here, there are lots. In regards to the King and Governor-General's roles, the King doesn't really do anything again, but the Governor-General officially swears in the Prime Minister and the ministers on behalf of the King. And that's how the executive works. The third group is the judiciary. The judiciary has the power to make judgments about the law, and it's made up of the judges of Australia's federal courts. The judgments that it makes are basically legal matters like trials and sentences. The judiciary can also decide if laws are constitutional, meaning does the Australian Constitution actually allow it to be a law? So even if the legislature makes a law, the judiciary can be like, well, the Constitution actually says you can't make that a law. And that's how the judiciary works. You can think of these three separate powers like infinity stones, and if someone collected them all, it would be bad. But because the power in Australia is separated between these three groups, no group or person in these groups can have too much power. That's why people say that the separation of powers is a system of checks and balances. Each of the three groups is supposed to keep the others in check, and the power is balanced between them. So basically I'm saying if one of them were to abuse their power, the other two would stop them. So, for example, if someone from the Parliament was corrupt, that's the legislature, they would be arrested and charged by the police, that's the executive, and they would be put on trial in court, that's the judiciary. One thing you might have noticed, however, is that there's not a complete separation of powers in Australia, and there is some overlap. This is because the Prime Minister, the ministers, the King and the Governor-General are part of both the legislature and the executive. The executive also has the power to select judges, and the legislature can vote to remove judges. So technically it should be called the almost separation of powers. So to summarise, the separation of powers is when the power of the government is separated between three groups. The legislature, which has the power to make and change laws, the executive, which has the power to put the law into action, and the judiciary, which has the power to make judgments about the law. Together they are a system of checks and balances to make sure nobody gets too much power. Leave a comment down below if you think the separation of powers is good.